I want to ask you, if creation occurred, let's say less than 10,000 years ago, and then there was a worldwide flood, which layers should have modern animals in them, since the modern animals that we see were also created at the time of creation? If creation and a flood occurred, there should be modern animals in every layer. And there are. And I'm going to show it to you. I'm going to prove it to you in the next 3 minutes. And this is why evolution has collapsed in the last 2 years. All these facts have just come out. And this is a factoid that you should just be whipping out anytime you're talking to somebody and saying that there are modern animals in every layer. So how is this evolution?
So with everything that we've covered today, what is, let's say, the one takeaway that you want people to get from this message?
Don't believe in evolution.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. Today we have an exciting guest joining us, Dr. Carl Werner, founder of the Evolution, the Grand Experiment book and video series. Dr. Werner, thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's great to be with you, man. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, thank you. So, Dr. Werner, speaking of your book and video series, specifically your book, Living Fossils, what are living fossils and how did you come to write that book?
Living fossils are fossils that you pull out of the rock. You go into rock layers, you find a fossil, and it looks like a living organism. Like you pull out a leaf and it looks like a sassafras leaf, or you pull out a fossil boa constrictor and it looks like a boa constrictor. So the fossil's not living, but the fossil looks like a living organism. And I got interested in this because I had this question about creation versus evolution. You have to understand that I started out as an evolution believer in college, and then I flipped to believing in creation. And I had lots of very strong criticisms of both theories, and I was trying to figure out which one is correct, And this is odd, but I thought of it this way. If God created everything, in a week of creation, and if that was it, that was the only time things were created. The dinosaurs were created, humans were created, apple tree, the Garden of Eden, all the animals and plants that have ever lived were created in that first week. And then if there was a flood and they all got mixed together, that I should find fossils of modern animals with the dinosaurs. In other words, you should be able to go to a dinosaur dig site and say, did you find an opossum here? Did you find a sassafras here? Did you find this? And to be honest with you, I didn't know of any modern animals or plants as fossils that were found with the dinosaurs. And so I thought that was a good, rebuke of the creation theory, because if there was no modern animals living with the dinosaurs, then creation couldn't be true because of what I just said. But also the reverse, if evolution wasn't true, you should find lots of modern animals and plants with the dinosaurs. And in fact, that's what you do find. You do find modern animals and plants with the dinosaurs. But when I started it, they were all hidden from me. For the scientists were hiding this under the cloak of changing their names. And so I couldn't get to the bottom. It took me about 10 years of filming interviews before I figured it out, you know.
Interesting. So
Yeah.
how did you get into photography, videography, and interviewing these scientists?
Well, to be honest with you, I have trained as a physician and a biologist in college, in medical school, and I had no experience with cameras, and I had no experience with video cameras, conducting interviews. And I had this idea that someone should look into the evolution versus creation debate, but do it for national television. And so I didn't see a need for me to do the work. I just started to pitch the idea to different PBS stations, the Discovery Channel, National Geographic. Hey, I want to do this series with you where we will go investigate evolution, and I'll do my part, but you do the filming and the editing and the creative part. And I was turned down by everybody. It was a work of futility, you could say. And the reason is they were all pro evolution. They weren't even open to the idea of questioning themselves. And you know, I had this burning desire within me to settle it for myself. Because like I said, I started out evolution, then I found all these problems with evolution, but I couldn't figure it out with creation. And so I was like, well, what do I do now? I have this desire, you know, and nobody will help me. Nobody, you know, nobody. And I asked a lot of people. I was like, what am I going to do? And I talked to my wife, and my wife is a go-getter. She is a Proverbs 31 kind of woman. And she said, well, let's just do it ourselves. And, you know, we might not be able to go 100 miles an hour, but we could get the equipment, and we could film the interviews, and we could form a television production company for national television, and we'll just make the film ourselves. Now, this sounds pretty ordinary today because you gentlemen grew up, you know, I don't know what years you were born, 2008 or something. I don't know what year you were born, but back then, nobody was doing this because you didn't have the ability to get cameras. You didn't have, you know, it was just very difficult back then. The equipment was so expensive and the like. And we eventually stumbled on and muddled through and formed a television production company. Then we started filming interviews, and we thought the whole process would only take us a year, but it ended up taking us 27 years. So what is that? You know, it's somebody that's very slow. And the reason was it was the answers weren't like just sitting out there. You had to peel away the layers from the scientists and keep asking questions. And then once you got down to the bottom of it, it's like, oh, I see what they're doing. They're doing this, they're doing this, they're playing all these games. But, you know, it really wasn't apparent. That's why it took 27 years to do it all. And so we just started filming interviews, and we'd get back to St. Louis, and my wife then would type out all these interviews. We did interviews with, I'm going to say, 104 scientists, and these were like 3 and 4 hour interviews. And Debbie transcribed all the interviews, word for word. Most of the interviews are about 35 pages, single space typed. So we developed that bit of resource, and then every time we go to a site, we would take 1,000 photographs. Now it's 5,000, but 1,000 photographs. And then we do interview the scientists, and we start accumulating all this data. Plus, I was reading books and stuff, and we eventually were able, after 10 years, we're able to assemble the first book, which is called Evolution: The Grand Experiment. I think it's over here on my shoulder. It's a green book, and then based on that, I thought someone needed to look in if there's modern animals with the dinosaurs. And we produced a second book, which is the blue book called Living Fossils.
Interesting. So kind of your time interviewing scientists, what did you guys learn from doing that?
As far as technically or as far as scientifically, which way?
Kind of both. I'd just like to hear the story.
Yeah. Well, we would always do the interviews, and we would present ourselves as a film company filming for national television, a series. And by the way, our series did get shown on 7 television networks like TBN and Hope Channel and things like that. So, but we told them we were we were interested in the topic of evolution and filming a series, and whatever they were studying, like if it was a dinosaur expert, we wanted to do a segment on dinosaur evolution, or someone on bats, that was their specialty, bats, you know. We wanted to do a segment on bat evolution. And it was kind of a correcting process for me, because I would start, I had preconceived ideas what they would say, and then, no, that's not true. It would always correct me, you know, like bring me back to the reality of what the fossils had. And eventually I learned that they have, like, I don't want to say a mission. They have a mission to promote evolution, which really got in my way, because I just wanted to get to facts. And I wanted to find out if evolution was true or not. And also, they had, I think subconsciously, developed techniques to hide information from the public. And so when we first started, we thought, when we couldn't get the information, we just thought it was not available. But then we realized when information is not available, it doesn't mean that it's not available. It just, I can't get it from there. I might have to keep looking. So it was a very much of a learning process. And I would say by the 30th interview, we were pretty good. But the first interview was terrible because we had too much lighting on the scientists. The audio was pitiful, you know, and all this stuff. So yeah, you don't want to be the first scientist that's interviewed in my series.
So then going forward, what is it that these scientists were sort of doing to kind of, I guess, muddy the waters and kind of promote evolution, let's say?
Yeah. So basically my big question was, did you find any modern animals here at your dinosaur dig site that are the same as the animals today? And I would ask that everywhere I went to the dinosaur dig sites. I don't know how many dinosaur dig sites we went to, maybe 25 or something, and did those interviews. And they would always say, no, we did not find any modern species of animals or plants that are living today with our dinosaurs. And if I had been a little bit weak-hearted and non-committed, because I knew there was some problem here, there has to be some answer to this, I would have just said, well, I guess creation's not true. And that's a terrible thing to give up early, you know, not really do due diligence on your question. But what I realized is subconsciously, the scientists, when they found a fossil that looked like a modern animal, and they were finding hundreds of them, their theory of evolution tainted their mind. I think it was subconscious. And they said, no, this, even though it looks just like a modern bumblebee, I mean, exact, no, this is not a modern bumblebee. It must be old. It must be 65 million years or older. That's what they believe. And so it couldn't possibly be a modern bumblebee or bat or whatever. Not bats. They didn't find bats at the dinosaur sites. So it have to be a different species. And then also, if it's a different species, it probably isn't a different genus group. And so you would have them with the fossil right in front of them, and then the live animal right in front of them. They would say, no, this is not the same animal. Even though every one of us will say, are you crazy? That's the same animal. And they would say, no, there has to be change here because this is 65 million years old. It took me a while to sort that out. And once I realized that that's what they've been doing, to me, the whole theory collapsed. The theory of evolution collapsed because this was a prediction. This was a prediction. I started out saying creation can't be true if modern animals aren't found with the dinosaurs. That's how I started out. And I started out saying, I know of none. And I still don't know of any modern species that are named modern names in any dinosaur layer. So it said to me, creation can't be correct. But if creation is correct, I should find them in the dinosaur layer. So I'm making a prediction, but I have no evidence for it. And this is the coolest thing about science, because a good scientific theory should be able to predict what's going to happen, you know. So I predicted it would be there, and after I figured this out, then they were all there. You know, not all of them, but hundreds of them. I never predicted that I would find every animal and every plant living today with the dinosaurs. I just said that with the great number of fossils found, and the number is 1 billion, 1 million fossils in each of the 1,000 museums. That's 1 billion fossils. With that many fossils, the odds are you'd have to find some modern animals with the dinosaurs. They said there were none, and then when I got finished, there are a whole book worth, you know.
Wow. So what you're telling us is that scientists are actually influenced by their biases.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, yes. And that's where the public gets tricked, because they think that if it's a scientist with a white coat on, that he is objective and he is factual, he would never lie, he would never distort the truth, that he wouldn't have biases. But that's like so far from the truth. Every scientist that comes into their field has a whole set of biases. In fact, a lot of people now that are atheists want to go into the field of evolution because that just supports their idea that atheism is true and there is no God. And so it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm an atheist, I become an atheist. I become a scientist who is atheist. Everything I see through my eyes, everything I pick up, you know, this phone, everything, you know, is another evidence of evolution. And that's the muddled part. That's the bias part. And once you start reading their papers and getting down to the really, really nitty gritty of like how they decide how animals are related to each other, it's so confused. It's so muddled. It's just their biases shining through. And then they make these strong, definitive statements like the hippopotamus is the closest living animal to the whale. You know, like, okay, sure.
Oh. So speaking of sort of like animals and classification, you mentioned earlier them kind of messing with the genus and species names. So what are you referring to when you say genus and species?
Well, if you don't mind, could I go to my slides and show you about 5 or 8 slides that would probably answer that better with the visuals than just me rattling on about it?
Definitely.
Okay, let me go to my slide share. Okay, so these are, what is there, a dozen or 2 dozen dog skulls. And, you know, a dog is called Canis familiaris. That's the Canis at the bottom there in blue is the genus, and familiaris is a species, and their species name is binomial. You take the genus and the species and add them together. So their species is Canis familiaris. Same with a human being. The genus is Homo, and then the species is sapien. So we're Homo sapien. And the part that misleads evolution scientists is that they want to identify every little difference between one fossil and another as, oh, this is a different species. Oh, because it has a bump on its nose, it's a different species. Oh, because it has, 4 teeth instead of 3, that's a different species. But I'm starting out with a slide here. I want to show you, these are, what I say, a dozen or 2 dozen dogs that had died in the last 50 years, right? And this is at the University of Missouri Vet School. And that's what veterinarians look at. They look at dog skulls. That's why they have them. And they have them all labeled, and we put them out on the table. And they're all dogs. Dogs all interbreed. And the definition of a species is a group of animals that can breed with each other and produce offspring. So a Chihuahua, believe it or not, is the same species as a bulldog, as the same species as a Doberman Pinscher, because a Chihuahua can theoretically reproduce with a Doberman Pinscher. They're all one species, Canis familiaris, but look at the skulls and look how different they are. This is a key. This is really important. Like, for example, the bulldog. Look how big the dome is on his skull, and he has these 2 big bumps. Can you see my my pointer there on the screen? Yep. So this one is Canis familiaris. He has these 2 big bumps, and look at his teeth go way out to the side. He looks really mean. And yet, if you look at this Chihuahua, he only just has a smooth dome, and his teeth go straight down. And then if you look at this Irish Wolfhound, instead of his skull being wide like the bulldog, his skull is long. But it's the same species. They all bow wow, and they all, reproduce, and they all have puppies. It doesn't matter. So within a species, there is great variations. Just imagine people, how many people if you could look at just their skeletons. Humans differ so much. There's short humans, there's tall humans. There's humans with longer arms, longer legs, shorter legs. Humans with, 6 lumbar vertebrae, 5 lumbar vertebrae. Humans with long fingers, short fingers. That's just nature. But this is what evolution scientists are doing. They would say, imagine this, guys, if that an evolution scientist had never seen a dog, and let's say dogs went extinct before, for this scientist, or before written history, let's just say that, and there was no knowledge of dogs. Okay, so you don't know what a dog is, and you don't know that there's these varieties. And just imagine if a scientist found these 12 skulls over the course of his lifetime. He would say, these aren't the same species because look how different they are, but they are the same species. That's the point I'm making. And he would say, well, surely they're not in the same genus group because of look at the massive difference in the thickness of their skulls and the location of the eyes and this and that. They can't be the same genus, but they are. And if you were a scientist, you would probably, and you had never seen a dog, you would probably call this one Carnivora double bump. And that would be his genus would be Carnivora, and his species would be double bump. And if you found this fossil, you would say, these aren't fossils, but if you had found this one as a fossil, you would say, this is long-heady, straight teeth. His genus is long-heady because he has a long head, and then he has straight teeth. And then you would say this one is thin skull is his genus because his skull is paper thin. You can kill a Chihuahua because their skull is so thin. Pest, thin skull pest. That's his. See, he would just, and they would just keep going on and on and on and on, and then they would write up all these papers, and then they would get all these awards, and then they would say that I have discovered, 14 genuses of different meat-eating animals, and this one This one probably gave rise to the llamas, and this one probably gave rise to the bears, and this one probably gave rise to the humans eventually. You know, you could write stories and just tell stories. But see, we have this in retrospect because we see what's been done here. We know the story. These are all the same animal species, same genus, same species. Well, that's the key to how they hid creation from the public because of their biases. They were naming the fossils different. And unless you did what Debbie and I did, and that's go around to 120 museums and university and photograph every fossil you could find, and then go to the nature parks, the botanical gardens, the zoos, and the natural history museums, and photograph all the moderns, and then put the modern next to the fossil, unless you did all that, which nobody's going to do except some wacky doctor, you know, nobody's going to do that. No one's going to spend their life doing that. No one's going to take 300,000 photographs and try to put them on an Excel spreadsheet. By the way, I quit at 60,000. I said, this isn't going to work. I can't enter all these picture numbers. But unless you're going to do all that, you're just going to accept the false information. But I want to go on just a little bit here and show you about a little video here about genus and species. So this is from our video series, and it's the show called Living Fossils. It goes along with the book Living Fossils. So just bear with me. It's about 3 or 4 minutes, but this is the show that Debbie and I filmed.
An animal's binomial scientific name is comprised of a genus name and then a species name. For example, a dog belongs to the genus Canis and the species Familiaris. Its scientific name is Canis familiaris. A species can be defined as a group of animals or plants that can breed and produce fertile offspring. Even within a single species, such as dogs, there are great variations in body size, shape, color, and types of fur. Besides these external differences, there are great variations in the internal anatomy of dogs, such as their skulls. For example, the skull of an Irish wolfhound and the skull of a bulldog are tremendously different. Yet these two animals can breed and are the same genus and species.
So once I came up with this idea, this prediction that we should find modern animals with the dinosaurs, I told my wife, Debbie, who's there in the picture, I said, okay, we've photographed all the dinosaurs, but we've been photographing the wrong things. We should have been photographing the fossils that were found with the dinosaurs, because that's the point. We're looking for them if there's any modern animals. So she asked me, well, what do you want me to do, boss? You know, she says, she calls me boss when she's being facetious. Well, what do you want me to do, boss? I said, well, boss, why don't you photograph the fossils here in the museum? And she said, sure, I'll be happy to. And she really got good at it. She had all this special equipment. She could shoot through glass. All the photographs you see in the book were shot through glass, by the way. And she said, sure, well, which fossils in the museum do you want me to photograph? I said, I want you to photograph all of them. She said, all of them that were found in the, quote, dinosaur layers. She said, you're kidding. And I was like, no, we got to photograph all of them, and we just didn't have enough familiarity with all the animals and plants on the world to say we could tell which ones to photograph. So I said, photograph them all. And that's why we got up to 300,000 photographs. So here she is, and here she is. And she's smiling here because it's 8 a.m., but by 9 a.m. she doesn't have that smile. And by 10 a.m. she's kind of like had it with her husband. Why did I marry this man? But here, I want to show you the fossil, the one fossil that was the breakthrough for me. And I'm hoping it'll be a breakthrough for you. Because every time I went into these museums and looked at the dinosaur fossils, I would say, gosh, that looks like a gar. But it's not the gar because it has a different genus and species name. I said, gosh, that looks like a, sea lily, or that looks like a modern, ginkgo or something. But they were always misnamed. And I always thought it was my own ignorance that because I can't see inside the fossil of the gar or whatever the fossil was, that I'm just the ignorant one. They look the same to me, but they say they're not. But this is a fossil, and this isn't a fossil. This is a live shell here. This is a one that I said, oh no, I got him. This was a breakthrough moment. You know what a nautilus shell is? You can buy them for $5 down in Florida at a shell shop. And it's really a cool animal. They live today in the ocean about 300 feet deep. And inside, they have these chambers that are pressure chambers that allow the nautilus to go up and down in the water. And what they do is they have this tube called a siphuncle that allows air to be taken out of these chambers or put into, so they can make the body heavier or more buoyant and go up and down. That's how they move around. And there's no, you can't miss what a nautilus looks like. By the way, in the body chamber here, this is the part that always breaks off because there's no supporting structures. But this is where all the guts are. The heart, the eyes, the kidneys, the tentacles, everything's in this area here. But if you owned one of these shells, you'll quickly find out that this will break off. So that's part that you can expect to be broken off. And then there's this fossil that was found next to a dinosaur. And you can tell that it looks like a nautilus, but that last chamber is missing. So I took off the last chamber just so they would be equal. I don't know that it didn't have a last chamber, but it had to have guts, so it had to have a last chamber. So I just took that off. I took it off of this one. And I looked at these and I said, oh my gosh, this is what I've been looking for, to be able to look inside and compare and do it at my leisure. And I realized this is the exact same animal. Look at here. Here's the siphuncle where that tube is. On the fossil, you can actually see the actual tube. It's soft tissue, but it was preserved, okay?
Wow.
And you can see the chambers, the unique shape of these chambers, and they match all the way around, all the way to the center. Match all the way around, all the way to the center. These two look the same to me. And I would ask you, do these look more similar than two different dog skulls? In other words, dogs are all the same species, but they have that wide variation. Do these look more similar to each other or dissimilar than all the dog species look to themselves? And to me, these are exact copies. I mean, there's no variation. There's a lot more variation just within the dog species. So that's when I realized, okay, there is a modern animal that was found next to the dinosaur, and here it is, the nautilus. But look what they did. This is the key to every young person to why you should abandon evolution. Look what they did. Now, this is just not one. They did this hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. The modern nautilus, it is in the genus called Nautilus. The species is Pompilius. The name is Nautilus pompilius. If you found this fossil, what would you call it? And I'll ask you, Mason or John, what would you call this fossil if you found it?
Nautilus pompilius.
I mean, it's a no-brainer, right? Yeah. Let's take a look at what they named it as. Oh no, this is not Nautilus genus. This is Cenoceros genus. Oh no, this is not the species Pompilius. This is Lineatus. Are you kidding me? You put these not only in a different species, but a different genus group, which is like the bigger group, like dogs and foxes and wolves are all in the same genus group. They're kind of similar. You're saying these aren't even similar to even put them in the same genus. And then I realized this is bull. And I was like, I'm not going to believe it anymore if they say they're different when I can say that they look the same. This is just, I can't use the proper words or else I'd be thrown off your show.
Yeah.
But this is bull. This is cow patty, you know? And so that's what they're doing. Every time they find a modern animal, they rename it. And by the way, this is why you could never find it. You could, unless you did what we did, because you go to a museum and you'd look at this fossil and say, that kind of looks interesting, look it up. And they would say in the Wikipedia article, this is not a modern nautilus. And if you look it up, different article, they said this is an extinct nautilus. And if you just were reading without words, without pictures, they would say, in the dinosaur era, there was an extinct genus of nautiloid called Cenoceros, but it has nothing to do with modern animals. And it would, you would never, ever, ever, ever be able to figure this out unless you had this idea beforehand to go searching and say, I think they have to be there. So this isn't one, it's a whole book. It's hundreds and hundreds of these that they've done. I'm going to show you some more. Oops, here's another movie.
The Great Barrier Reef, located several miles off the coast of northeastern Australia, is the world's largest reef system, stretching over 1,000 miles, and is known for its corals and sponges. Dr. Werner dove here, looking for a match to a fossil coral he had seen at the Carnegie Museum. Before reaching his destination, this particular dive produced a treat. Dr. Werner was greeted by a giant 4-foot hump-head Maori wrasse, who surprisingly performed a dance with this reef explorer. After this exhilarating encounter, his search continued for a modern coral to match this fossil exhibited at the Carnegie Museum. He eventually was successful. Although the fossil, with its round shape and mouth-like slit opening, was broken, the similarities between the living mushroom coral and the fossil were remarkable. But again, the dinosaur-era fossil was given a different genus and species name. Dr. Werner found fossilized examples of all of the major invertebrate groups, or phyla, living today in the dinosaur rock layers.
That was from our video, our show called Living Fossils. And if you haven't seen it yet, you all need to get that because it's spectacular. It's shot in all these countries, 16 countries. And we went from site to site. But I just want to finish up with this thought before I quit my screen share, is that now that you get what they're doing, now you make the judgment. Does the fossil look more different than the modern animal than two dog skulls? That's the same question you keep asking over and over. Does this look more different than the two dog skulls look different? I say these have the same amount of variation or less. And yet the modern shell is called Babylonia perforata, and the fossil, which is found next to a dinosaur, is Lioplacatus. And so here we go. Here is a alligator, modern alligator, a fossil alligator that was found up in Alberta, Canada, next to the dinosaurs.
Wow.
And yeah, wow. Right here, it doesn't have the nasal septum, but that's an artifact because those are very small and they break off. But you would have to, when you look at the rest of it, does this vary more than two dogs? I would say, no, that's the same animal. And yet they put them in different genuses, different species. And here is the feather stars. The fossil feather star was found next to a dinosaur. And this modern, we filmed this feather star at an aquarium up, I think, in Alaska Sea Life Center. These look the same, and yet they're given different genus and species name. And here is a hedgehog. Here's the modern hedgehog jaw from two different angles. And if you look at these teeth and look at this fossil that was found next to a dinosaur, in a dinosaur lair, these look like a match, less different than a dogwood. Not a dogwood tree, but a dogwood different. But and same, so I could go on, but you see what I'm doing here, and all of a sudden my hypothesis just popped out, and that's when you know your theory works, when you don't get kind of an idea that maybe it's right. No, if it's right, everything should just jump off the page, and that's what happened. I was like, I couldn't go fast enough. In fact, I got to 200 or 300 of these. I don't know how many's in the book. I said, there's no point. Keep going. You know, the point has been made. They're changing the names, and that modern animals have been found with dinosaurs, and that is the prediction of what the creation theory would make, and that's what we found. So,
Wow.
if you still believe in evolution, go ahead. Good luck on that one. I feel sorry for you.
Wow. Then kind of doubling down here, how damaging is finding these organisms like this to the theory of evolution? Just to kind of put like the line at the end of the sentence.
Well, if you ask that to an evolutionist, and I will now play their part, this is not a problem. We predicted this all along. Some animals are so well adapted to a particular environment that they would not change, even though our theory says that animals keep changing and survival of the fittest, and one animal gets better and bigger and better. But this is not a problem. We're not bothered about this at all. That's what the evolutionists would say. And then Carl Werner would say, are you nuts? This is crazy that we can find poppy plants and walnuts and frogs next to the dinosaurs, and all these animals that we find, all the amphibians, and the frogs and the salamanders, and we have all three types of mammals living today: the pouch mammals, the placental mammals, and the monotremes. We have most or all the birds that are living today, the orders, have been found next to a dinosaur. And, it gets kind of redundant, but we have all the major aquatic arthropods that we found those with the dinosaurs. And we found all the major insect orders living today, like bumblebees and, flies and stuff like that next to the dinosaur. We found all four arachnid orders living today, the spiders, with the dinosaurs, and they look the same. And we found all five major shellfish classes living today with the dinosaurs. And we found the worms, the tube worms and the earthworms next to dinosaurs, and all three types of sponges living today next to the dinosaurs, and the corals, both the soft and hard corals. And then the plants, we found chestnut trees next to dinosaurs, oak trees, sassafras, poplar, walnut, ash, viburnum, magnolia, poppy, rhododendrons, your mother likes those, lily pads, sweet gum, soapberry, bay, Everglades palm. We found all the conifer types, pine trees, sequoia, redwoods, cook pine. And then we found all these ferns that are alive today next to the dinosaurs: tree fern, sensitive fern, wood fern, mosquito fern, shield fern, horsetail. And then the cycads, yes, we found those that are the cycads that you see down in Louisiana today. You find them next to the dinosaurs. We found ginkgos, the club moss, and peat moss, peat moss that you put on your garden. We found that next to the dinosaurs. So, yeah, it just more or less, you can read it either way, but for me, this was what I was looking for to satisfy my scientific doubting. This did it for me. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's incredible. Out of curiosity, do we find any examples of organisms living today that are found in layers below the dinosaurs?
Oh, I am so glad you asked that. Let me think here. I'm just trying to see if you have the wherewithal. If I pulled up a 3-minute slideshow that would show you that modern animals have been found in every rock layer, not just the dinosaur layers. Go to the very bottom layer, the Cambrian, the Ediacaran, the Pennsylvanian, all the way up to the very top layer. Every layer has modern animals. And evolution scientists would say, no, that's not true. But it is true. And that's what would you predict, that modern animals would be found in all the layers if it was creation and a flood? Let me ask you that. Would you predict that you should find modern animals in every layer if creation was true and then there was a flood? What do you think, men?
I would say there's a definite possibility of that, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Definite possibility, yeah. But you would say it would. That's what you're looking for.
Yeah,
And the
yeah.
evolution scientists, they would say this is poppycock. They'd say that's bull. There's no modern animals found except for the top layers. If you'll hold on a second, I'm going to pull up the slideshow and I'll show you all the layers have modern animals. This is historic, by the way, and this is why evolution has collapsed in the last 2 years. All these facts have just come out, and this is a factoid that you should just be whipping out anytime you're talking to somebody and saying that there are modern animals in every layer. So how is this evolution? Now, we know extinction occurred because dinosaurs aren't around anymore, and the plesiosaurs aren't around. But extinction isn't evolution. Extinction is extinction. Just because there's an animal in one of these lower layers that you don't recognize, that doesn't mean evolution occurred. That means that animal went extinct. But if creation and a flood occurred, there should be modern animals in every layer. And there are. And I'm going to show it to you. I'm going to prove it to you in the next 3 minutes. And I'm going to start at the bottom layer, and we're going to work your way up. Now, this is predicated on, remember what the difference is between the dogs and how they rename them? See, they're renaming every one of those. You just have to judge whether these animals that I'm showing you look like the modern variety. And if they do, then it's a modern appearing animal found in that layer. Okay, bottommost layer. This is a sea pen. It's saltwater, but it's also modern appearing. It looks like the modern sea pen. Watch this. I just get a kick out of this. I filmed this at the aquarium. I think it was in Vancouver or something. And that's a live sea pen, and that's the fossil sea pen in the lowest layer. I say that's the modern appearing. Isn't that amazing? That's the lowest layer. Okay, let's just keep going. I got to tell you now the story about my wife who about killed me. This next story is about a modern animal in the next layer up. And this is when, now Debbie wouldn't divorce me. She said she wouldn't, but Debbie wouldn't divorce me, but she felt like divorcing me on this day. No, she really wasn't, but she was mad. She was mad at me. Let me just tell you this story. This is Debbie. We're down in the Caribbean Sea off of St. Thomas. We're on a sailboat filming for our series, okay? And we both just came up from snorkeling and photographing. And she said, I got bit. And it really hurts. I said, what's the matter? She says, look at my right above, like my mustache area. I got stung by a invertebrate. And I said, oh, that looks miserable. She was miserable. She was not happy. So this is what stung her down in the Caribbean. It's called a bristle worm, okay? They look beautiful, but each of those little hairs has a stinger on it, okay? Now, that's the modern. But here is a bristle worm that was found in the Cambrian, which is the second lowest layer. Now, I want to explain this. This is the Smithsonian's display. It looks just like this. This is the actual fossil. This is their photograph of the actual fossil. And then this is their drawing based on using the microscope of what it looks like under the microscope. This was found in the Cambrian, and guess what? It looks like the animal that stung my wife. I call that, based on the dog comparison, a modern appearing animal. So there was modern animals in the Cambrian, and that's not the only one. Here's an Ordovician sea star. It looks like the modern sea star. Here is the Silurian sea star. It looks like the modern sea star with the double rows down here. Here is a brittle star, modern, that was filmed off of Hawaii. I didn't take that picture. And here is the fossil brittle star in the Devonian layer. Now, this one was really cool. My wife and I were in New Zealand, and we were walking on the beach around 6:30 in the morning because the sunrise was coming up. We were driving. We pulled over to see the sunrise. And look what washed up on the shore. A stemmed crinoid. You know, when I was a kid, I used to think that the crinoid fossils that I found in my parents' sidewalk were extinct animals. And I used to think that, you know, that kind of went along with great times in the past. But here is a modern crinoid that died, washed up on this beach, and it looks like the fossil from the Mississippian layer. Wow. Modern appearing. Is that incredible?
Yeah.
Nobody's ever seen that. Here's a fossil starfish that was in the Pennsylvanian. Here is, let me explain this one. This is the Carnegie Museum, and they said we found these fossils of this lungfish, and this is our drawing of what it would have looked like based on these. And here is the modern lungfish that we took a picture of, and they look the same. That's a modern animal in the Permian. Here's the seashell in the Triassic. Here's the shovel-nosed ray. You saw that before. But look, the modern shovel-nosed ray, this was caught off the coast of California on a hook and line. This is pulled in a little bit because he's not flat, but you get it. It looks like the same animal. It's a modern appearing animal. Here is a sea biscuit, what they call them, the modern sea urchin, and here's the fossil. They look indistinguishable. By the way, every one of these has been renamed by the scientists, so you would never know that they're modern appearing. Here's a trumpetfish from the Paleocene. Here's a sand dollar from the Eocene. Here's some walnuts from the Oligocene. Here's a frog from the Miocene. Here's another sand dollar. Here is the modern coral with the fossil coral from the Pleistocene and those shellfish, so that modern appearing animals are found in every named rock layer, from the Holocene all the way down to the Ediacaran. So how is that?
That's amazing.
No, and I don't think any evolutionists know this. So you boys need to pull this out of your back pocket and whoop it on them.
Yeah, that really is incredible.
Yeah. So with everything that we've covered today, what is, let's say, the one takeaway that you want people to get from this message?
Don't believe in evolution. It's just a made-up story. It's made up by a bunch of losers. You know, Charles Darwin. It's serious. I'm serious. Charles Darwin was a loser. Ernst Haeckel was a loser. All these guys were just losers, and they were just like atheists, and they thought they could explain away God. But when you actually peel off the layers, this theory doesn't work at all. And you know, we only had an hour. Give me 5 more hours. Give me 15 more hours, and I'll take out the other chunks for you. You know, I could do it. We could do just what we did, but we could do for human evolution, or just what we did. We could do it for geology. We could do this kind of level of information. We could do it on any of these topics. The whole theory is a joke. This is a joke theory. They got away with it for 150 years because it just was hard to pin them down. We didn't have access to the scientists. But now with the internet, now with air travel, we can get around. One individual can go do this work. You just have to read the book series, and you can just be assured that there was no evolution, you know. And I would like to just take a moment and ask everyone in the audience to consider reading our book series. And it is so simple. The books have like, 700 to 900 photographs in them. They're so easy to read. They're just like, you could read them in about 3 hours. You know, the book Living Fossils or Grand Experiment or Human Evolution. And bone up on this information, and let's get caught up, because we're counting on the young people to grasping this and running with it. We've done all the work, but now you have to do the work of internalizing it. That's why I want you to read the book series, and then bring other people along, because this is a process of turning over a theory. It's a process where you have to slowly change the culture. Also, I would ask you to consider watching our entire video series. Yeah, it's all fantastic.
Well, thank you so much again for that. And we'll provide a link in the description for people to find your books and DVD series. Thank you so much again for the work that you've done with this. I mean, that was amazing.
You're welcome. And I know that you men are less than 60 years old, and so you don't watch DVDs. And so for your friends and you, we also have the video series on streaming. So if you come to our website, thegrandexperiment.com, you can rent the shows and watch them as a streaming, or you can buy them, whatever. So
Awesome. Yeah, it's cool that you guys made it available like that too.
we know that DVDs are dying, just like the dinosaurs.
Sad. I grew up on DVDs.
And we still watch them. We still watch them and love them. You know, I'm still DVD based, but
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, we are too. So, does that pretty much cover everything that you wanted to cover?
Yes.
All right. So then with that, we'll probably go right into the outro.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for watching, and Dr. Werner, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, man. And really appreciate your work and having this podcast, because I know it's a lot of work, all the editing and all that.
You know, guys like you and your work make it all worth it, sir.
Yep.
All right. Well, God bless.